So yesterday, I get an email on my phone about ChatGPT 5, some kind of ad or whatever, and I start thinking, I already have ChatGPT on my phone, so I go to ChatGPT and I'm trying to look and see, is it even is it ChatGPT 5 already, or I think I downloaded this like a year or so ago, so it must be ChatGPT 4. And I can't see any labeling on it on the app. I went to the app store. I'm like, which one do I have? I didn't know if you have to like download a new app to get this ChatGPT 5. So I figured, well, I guess I could ask him it. So I asked ChatGPT. I'm like, what ChatGPT are you? And it's like, I'm ChatGPT 5. I'm like, cool. All right. Well, what's the difference between ChatGPT 5 and 4? And it says, quite a tactful explanation. I wish I had more tact, but something along the lines of, I remember conversations better, so I can have more coherent conversations with you, and other great things. So I'm like, okay, coherent conversations. What do I like to talk about? And I was buying raw milk, so I'm like, oh yeah, what do you think about raw milk, ChatGPT? And it gives me this, more than I expected, a kind of 50-50 point on it, but it listed risks and pros and cons, but it was still leaning, almost more towards the risks. It definitely said you can drink raw milk and there can be benefits to raw milk, but these are the risks. So I said, how do you know that you're not saying this because of the fact that giant corporations own information and probably own you, and you're not getting the full story when you're listing these risks, because I didn't say this part to ChatGPT, but I know the chronological order of it, and there are just so many things that we're bombarded with, these like 5% truths where it seems like it's true because they tell parts of the truth, but in reality it's not. So the chronological order story about raw milk is simple. There was never pasteurization, and people were not just dropping dead like flies. But in I forget, the 1890s or whenever it was, about that point, there was more industrialization. Because of that, they started moving cows into the cities. And of course, giant corporations were giant corporationing. We can say BlackRock. BlackRock was BlackRocking like it does, and was trying to maximize profit. So a lot of these farms, if you even want to call them that, places where they were having cows, dairies, were conveniently located next to distilleries, often close to distilleries. And so they fed, cows, instead of grass, you can feed them wheat, which is cheaper, but it's less quality milk, less quality cow, less quality health of the cow. They can get by on wheat, and it's better to eat wheat than nothing, in a winter or whatever, but it's not quality. So they skip that. In distilleries, they have byproduct called spit grain or split grain, I forget what it's called, but there's a byproduct after the alcohol process. So they were feeding cows that, and that was a disaster. The cows were very sick. It was changing the rumen in their gut. So that was allowing their guts to be, more acidic. Because it's more acidic, say before this process, if a cow had tuberculosis or something like that and we drank the milk, that tiny little bit of that disease would die in our stomach. And if anything, maybe you just get a little diarrhea or, upset stomach, but nothing serious. After they start feeding the cows these byproduct alcohol, wheat garbage, the pathogens or the bacteria or the diseases, whatever it is, was adapting to the more acidic rumen, it's called, in the cow's gut microbiome, or whatever the smart word is for that. So because of that, now when we drink that milk, it's adapted and it doesn't die in our stomach acid, and then we get tuberculosis or listeria or whatever else, and have all these problems. So it was like a huge outbreak. For a change, when they used the word outbreak, it was probably true. A lot of people were dying. And they came up with pasteurization instead of course, fixing the issue, which would lose them a little bit of profit, or they would maybe not lose profit. They could just pass the cost down to the normal folk like they typically do. But they decided pasteurization also because it comes with so many other profitable benefits, like long shelf life, and being able to transport the milk long distances with it not going bad as fast. So this is where the half truth or 5% truth comes from. If you don't pasteurize milk, it's dangerous to drink. That's true, except it's only true for their BlackRock milk. If you don't pasteurize their poisonous milk, you will certainly get sick and you will die. If you don't pasteurize healthy cows' milk, where they're eating grass, living in the correct conditions, there's not like 4 zillion cows to 2 acres. There's some acres laws that I know that there's a loophole. Something like 1 acre per cow. That's a lot of land. But it caps at 5 or something like that. So if you have 5 acres or 6 acres or whatever, you can now have like a gazillion cows. And what do you think BlackRock giant corporation milk is doing? And pretty much every milk you get from a store that's generally, pasteurized, any Cloverfield, this, that, Rosenbergers, they're all the same. They're coming from the same type of standards, if not the same exact place. When I was a truck driver, I used to drive past somewhere off of I-10, and it was insane. You could just see cows, and it was like there was nothing but cows for as far as I could see, and you could smell it way before you could see it, like a mile or two. We're talking a tremendously horrible smell because all the cows are living on top of each other. They're living in their own piss, pneumonia, and just a disastrous way to live. But of course, the most profitable way to handle them and sell milk. So that's where that 5% truth comes from. And I think if it's the perspective, the angle that you come at this from is important, because that 5% truth is really worse than a lie in reality. So if you don't pasteurize milk, from a cow that eats grass and is kept in healthy conditions and more closer to that 1 cow per acre or 2 cows per acre, whatever, small farms are out here struggling because of all of the loops they have to jump through because of giant corporations trying to crush them. That's just going to be an entirely different situation than, BlackRock milk. Another thing, it's funny, things get so politicized, right? And people love to fight on this side or that side. And it seems like raw milk seems to get pushed over towards the Republican side, which is funny. I don't consider myself a Republican or a Democrat. I was definitely a Democrat like 10 years ago. But it's politicized, maybe because that sort of natural option seems to also align with a lot of that anti-vax rhetoric. I feel like even with the vaccines, it's like, it's not so much the idea of introducing a tiny bit of this disease to then create immunity. I don't think that's bad. I'm definitely not anti-vax or hardcore pro-vax. I'm just on the fence about it, and I think that health comes from a lot of other things that have nothing to do with that. But I'm sure that introducing, a small amount of the disease for your body to fight it is a great thing, right? Does that make me pro-vax? I guess. But the thing that makes me lean not pro-vax is that I know they're adding other things in the vaccine. It's not just a tiny little bit of the flu or a tiny little bit of COVID so that our body can fight it and handle it. Otherwise, that sounds great. But they're putting heavy metals in it and, whatever else. I haven't really followed that argument. There's too many other ones I have with other health things that I think are more important for preventative health. So, but yeah, if anything, drinking raw milk from a cow that, is sick, but it's healthy in quality conditions, that's probably the better option of a vaccine to be immunized, if that's the right word, against some kind of sickness. So I get emails from the Amish farm. I don't think they're Amish, but they're out there near Lancaster. And I get emails like once a year. We have a recall. One of our cows or something got tested and it came back positive for listeria or this or that, right? And after they say, we'll send you your money back if you don't want to drink your milk, or if a result of this is you had to throw out milk, that's fine. We'll send you your money back. However, disclaimer in the bottom, they're like, we're going to continue drinking our milk because we're not worried about this at all, because they understand that a disease in a cow that's healthy and strong is such a different situation from giant corporation evil BlackRock milk. So anytime I've gotten that email, I drink the milk. One time, I'm pretty sure I got diarrhea from that exact thing. It was pretty aggressive diarrhea, unusual than just like eating something bad. But I have that happen all the time when not drinking raw milk. So it's just, sometimes there's just like a bug, whatever, some kind of sickness, some kind of disagreement in the stomach. But this time I was drinking the raw milk. I saw the email. I continued drinking raw milk. I bought more from them like a few days later. And, I had some pretty aggressive diarrhea. It was waking me up. It was pretty bad. I'm assuming that I probably got whatever that sickness is, but it was like not an issue. Certainly didn't need hospitalization, a little bit of inconvenience. But now, per vaccine theory, I am more immune to whatever that disease was, if that was in fact why I had diarrhea. So, yeah, I think there's just, rather than a pro-cons list, it's just a ton of pros. All these quality things for drinking milk from people who care about their cows, care about their farms, care about their customers, not just for the profit. But they're incentivized for profit too to care about their customers. But it seems like they probably really do care about their customers as well. Like they believe in the system of regenerative farming and creating good quality products. Meanwhile, BlackRock will do anything for profit. And people are just like, brainwashed into just like, whatever they say, I'll do that. I have to do that. Like you should have some distrust for them and trust the Amish or whoever is running this raw milk farm and caring about their cows. I've been drinking raw milk since I heard about it in 2011 and I found it. And I've had no issues aside from, an upset stomach occasionally. And even that I feel like is overblowing it because it may well have been from something else. There's cabbage recalls, there's egg recalls for all, you can have eggs and get salmonella. I would rather get it from raw milk that a cow, a healthy, properly treated cow got, because I like my chances with that much better. So the ChatGPT conversation, I'm going to put that on here now and see how that went. So yesterday I had the idea to ask ChatGPT 5 what it thinks about raw milk, And after I did that, it kind of gave a little bit less of a pro milk stance. And I had the idea that I'd make a video about it after I'd done it. But I lost that conversation, and now I tried to make another one today by starting the same way. So yesterday I said, what do you think about raw milk? And it gave, a pretty 50-50 opinion about it. But all of the flaws I think are easily, proven wrong. So I said, I spoke to it and I said, how do you know that you're not controlled by giant corporations that are going to, try and control the information and make sure that they care about their profit margins, and that pasteurization is actually just a method to help them make more profit because they do horrible practices to the cows, which create bad milk in the first place to then need to be boiled, which that was never an issue, before. I don't think I said it. It's never been an issue, but, I said, this is all just about profit. And some of your sentences, because some of the sentences that ChatGPT 5 said was like, oh, these are the risks, when in reality, they're not actually risks for milk that comes from cows that are raised in a normal way. They are only risks, and huge risks at that, from giant corporation BlackRock Milk, by giant billion dollar corporations that only care about the bottom line and do absolutely nothing for the benefit of our health, only to not be sued and to maximize profit, which in turn breaks like every moral rule, basically torturing the animals far more than is necessary if you're a vegan. I'm not, but I understand their points, and it does not maximize health at all. So now I'm like, okay, I'm going to make that video. Let me get the same conversation. So I said, what do you think about raw milk? And it seems like it remembers, which is also another point that yesterday, the reason I even looked on ChatGPT was because I got an email, something about ChatGPT 5, and I'm like, oh, I have the app. So I asked ChatGPT, which one are you? And it said, I'm ChatGPT 5. And I said, what's the difference? And it said, I have a better memory of our past conversations and, to have more coherent conversations. So I'm like, okay, cool. So I started talking about raw milk, and, after I said, how do you know that you're not just saying that these things are dangerous about raw milk because of, giant corporations controlling you? And it said, wow, that's a great point. That's a great point. And then it followed up with, actually pasteurization started in the late 1800s when companies started moving the cows closer to the city and leaving them next to distilleries, feeding them, where does it say that here? Let's see. Yeah, introduced in the 1800s. They were producing contaminated milk. See how it's, this is a lot more the actual story, the actual chronological story, because you can tell a story in so many different ways that are like kind of the truth, but it's actually not the truth. And I feel like we're bombarded with that kind of information in regards to all kinds of things, not just milk, where we're kind of getting truths. So it's easy, for us to split up into groups and fight each other on it because there's certain truths, that are there. Like, yes, if you don't pasteurize this milk, you will get sick. You don't have a chance of getting sick. You probably will get sick, and you probably will die. But that's not milk in general. That's giant corporation BlackRock Milk. That is here, contaminated milk in urban centers, often from cows in poor conditions, being fed brewery waste. See, that's the other key. Not only are they taking a step down from grass and feeding them wheat because it was easier or more profitable or whatever, they were feeding them byproduct of breweries that use wheat. And then there's a byproduct, something about, what do they call it here? Brewery waste. I think I saw one of the times it said something about mash, but I've heard it called spit grains or split grains. So here, without me saying anything, I just say, what do you think about raw milk? And it pretty much gives this picture where it's sort of the pros and cons. But even still, I'm suggesting that the cons are not true because they are only, part of the story. So here, I try to see how intelligent it is and what else it would say. So, I asked this question. How do you know that it's not because giant corporations, profit off of pasteurization? And ChatGPT 5 seems to basically agree that, again, pasteurization was developed in the late 1800s with awful conditions. Cows are sick, living in filth. And I'm still just, even though I'm surprised that ChatGPT seems to be like somewhat agreeable and even coming up with the reasons why, I'm still just not liking the perspective or, the wording, because that makes a huge difference. Milk was often stretched with chalk. Like, hold on a second. These companies are so evil, they don't really care about anything except profit, that they're willing to literally sell milk even though it's not entirely milk. There's chalk in it, flour, formaldehyde. I don't even know about that, but yeah, I know there's chalk. Like, that's crazy. They're just stretching it with chalk. Like, why trust one tiny little bit of anything that they say if that's how they're operating? That's the kind of integrity that they're displaying, the character. It's insane. I've read before something about chalk because it helps make it whiter. Like, it was losing its white color after like aggressive pasteurization, and or even before pasteurization, there was like some discoloration because of what they were feeding the cows. But okay, that doesn't mean all milk inherently needs pasteurization. Like that's a nice point. What's true today? Industrial dairies, thousands of cows, confined, fed grains instead of grass, sometimes heavy antibiotic use, do increase contamination risks. So pasteurization makes their product safe enough, I like the quotes, to sell at scale. On the other hand, raw milk from healthy pasture-raised cows on small farms can be much safer, but it's still not risk-free because even healthy cows can shed bacteria. So this is another issue, as I said in the beginning of the video, with the fact that illnesses given to cows under the right conditions don't really come to us as much. And if anything, right, it's more of like a vaccine, if anything, than some of the altered DNA altering RNA, whatever vaccines with heavy metals and all kinds of crazy stuff in them. So you're right that large corporations benefit from pasteurization, long distance shipping, longer shelf life, all things that drive profit. Here's the other beautiful thing it says. It also creates a barrier for small farmers, since raw milk sales are heavily restricted in many states. So they're obviously crushing their competition, and limiting competition, which is a structural advantage for the big players. So yeah, the system tilts in the favor of corporations. They definitely say things a lot better than I would. So, right, and the fourth thing here where it says, okay, there are still bacteria infection, there are still cases, but it pretty much beat me to, that point, which is, yeah, but the scale of the risk is often exaggerated in official messaging, like, oh my God, outbreak of raw milk, whatever. In reality, it's like 30 people in some town, like, went to the hospital with a stomach ache. Like, that's not exactly dangerous. 20 million people drink raw milk in America, and there's 40 to 60 cases a year of hospitalization and 0 deaths. Is danger really the right word? Like, I chalk it up to someone probably tried to convince someone else to get into raw milk, and they're kind of like a hypochondriac, and then all of a sudden they have diarrhea the next day, probably because the Wendy's they had, and now they're like, oh my God, it was the raw milk, blah, blah, blah. Now, the media blows it up and turns it into this huge thing when in reality it was nothing. That's my take.